everybody, it's Anthony Brogdon. I'm your guy, you my people, and let me tell you something. I am super excited about the gentleman who is on my show today. I'm not playing with you. Let me tell you, because I have found this guy by happenstance. I interviewed one of his proteges, one of his mentees, one of his followers, who said, if you can get this guy on the channel, you have really come up. I'm Anthony Brogdon. I'm an ordinary guy doing some extraordinary things, and it's because of people like this gentleman that is on my channel. I'm a better person since Strong Inspirations. I have learned so much. And I'm gonna have him, we're gonna get into it, but I'm tripping everybody. He is in that London, England, the UK, because Strong Inspirations is international. We're going to tell Black history from around the world, my friends, so that you get a thorough picture, a complete picture of our history. I told somebody the other day, Black history ain't just Black history. Black history is history that happened with Black people in it. That's all it is. And so that spans the whole gamut. There is nowhere that Black folks don't touch some history in some form or fashion. You're going to hear some interesting stories today. Hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. It don't cost no money. It just let me know you like me. Hit the like button on this video. You're going to love it. My man is sharp. He got the tie, the suit. He ready. He going to give it to you. Hit the notifications bell for when the video's up. You get a ding, a shock, or something like that. And then tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't do that. Let it flow. Come on, my friends. And it's happening here at Strong Inspirations. Now, did you see the one I did out of the UK? I'm going to stay in this man's part of the world with the lady who she gives Black history tours in London. Watch that video, because there's some stuff that Black folks did over there that's amazing. There's no question about it. And one of the things she talked about is that Florence Nightingale, you might have heard her name. That was a Black lady that was tougher than her. And her statue is bigger than Florence Nightingale's. This sister went on the firing line right there where the troops were being killed and hurt and maimed, and did her job. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did out of London, England, where the lady, she got a bookstore and she named it after Tulsa, Oklahoma? She called it Black Wall Street Bookstore. And she's outside of London. I don't know, maybe I think Manchester or something like that. She said, I'm in an area where there ain't many of us, and these white folks is eating this up. They are interested in the things that she's doing over there, and the products and so on and so forth. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the guy out of London, England, who talks about him being from Jamaica and why the London people and all the invited the people from the Caribbean to come back and help inside London to grow that city? Watch that video. And we got them all over the world. We got them like the guy who talks about going in them pyramids in Egypt. He said, this is what you will see when you go inside one. Watch that video. You go, and this gentleman right here, you're gonna love this. This is gonna be very good. Couple more things, everybody. I got this movie out. It's a documentary, and you can see it in the UK. It's on Amazon UK. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. Part of my aim is to share with folks that there were enslaved Black folks who owned businesses. I name them and how they used their profits to buy their freedom. You can't hold us down for too long. We're going to figure out a way. We're going to figure that loophole out and rise to the top. So watch this, everybody. It's, like I say, it's streaming in the UK. Go to Amazon, Business in the Black. And then I went one step further. I wrote this book on the topic. It's got more facts than the documentary. Very thorough. And I'm going to get copies over in the UK. Watch. So get you a copy of this. It's available on my website only at this present time, which is businessintheblack.net. Couple more things, my friends, before I have him come on. I got stuff happening. I wrote a stage play based on my book. The play will happen here in Detroit, where I'm based, March 31st, April 1st, April 2nd. It's called They Did It. Tickets on Eventbrite, and I'm going to make sure that this play tours the country. Watch. People need to hear them stories, because they didn't tell me that. If I would have knew that, I'd have been inspired that much more. And check this out, just between me and you, my guests, I'm coming to London next October for their Black History Month. I'm putting together some stuff. I want to speak over there and have a party too. Watch that. All that will be announced soon, the dates and all that stuff on the website, Business in the Black. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. I try to be a strong guy in many respects. This show has made me stronger. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to the strong soul brother out of the UK on my channel. Come on, sir, introduce yourself. Thank you very, very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Robin Walker. I'm also known as the Black History Man. And what I do for a living is I am an educator, an author, a publisher, and my job is to spread powerful Black history information.
Love it. So a couple questions on you. Where were you born? Can I ask that?
I was born in London. I was born in 1967. I lived for 4 years in Britain and then 2 years in Jamaica, which is where my family's from. And then the rest of the time was back in Britain. I grew up in Milton Keynes, and I've been living in London as an adult.
Now, you say Britain. Is Britain different than London?
Britain is England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. It's considered one political entity, so we just call it Britain. The capital of it is London.
What's the UK? Is that the same thing as Britain?
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
yeah, United Kingdoms. Yeah,
it's the same thing. But all those different cities that you name have individual governments. Isn't that correct? They're individual entities.
They have a certain amount of self-government, but in truth, London does have more power than each one. Do you see? So they have a certain amount of individual power. And what they're trying to do is get more power. So Scotland is trying to find ways of breaking away. Northern Ireland has been finding ways to break away. Do you see? But in reality, London does have more power than they do.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you, in the neighborhood that you grew up, was it an all-Black neighborhood? What was that dynamic like where you grew up?
Okay, well, I was born in London. I was born in an area called Lambeth. Lambeth is close to Brixton, and Brixton has the same kind of reputation in British history as Harlem has in American history. So if Black Britain does have a capital, you could say Brixton. But unlike America, Harlem, Harlem was at one time, almost all Black. Yeah. Brixton was never all Black. It had a large concentration of Black people. But if you were to do a population study of Brixton, it still had more non-Blacks than Blacks. Do you see?
Okay. Yeah? So now, growing up there, why was that the community? Because it was less desirable? Was there something why all the Black people lived there?
Yeah, what happened was modern Black Britain starts in 1948. Large numbers of people from the Caribbean entered Britain. And you may have heard of something called the Windrush generation.
Okay, yes.
And what happened was a lot of Windrush people were settled in an area called the Clapham Deep Shelter. It was a bomb shelter used during World War II, and it was then repurposed. So a lot of black people were settled there, and a lot of them got jobs in the local area. And then that local area just ended up as Brixton. And so more and more people came. Brixton became the place, and Brixton has had that reputation ever since, you see.
Okay, let me ask you: what when they got the jobs? What was there a particular industry? You know, like here in Detroit was the auto industry. Was there an industry in that area that they employed them in?
Generally speaking, a lot of black people in Britain ended up being employed by about half a dozen different industries. And the main ones were for women, the National Health Service. So a lot of them became nurses. For men, it was just as in America, the railways. Another one was the buses. So my mum, for example, was a bus conductress, and that was a very, very common thing. There was for women, there was a company owned by Jewish people that employed large numbers of blacks called Lions Tea Houses. And then the other area were for black people that settled outside London, places like Nottinghamshire. Lots of black men became miners. So another area was the postal service. So essentially, railways was probably the biggest. The underground railways was another one. The buses, these were the biggest industries that black people were employed in.
Okay. Did you were any white people in your neighborhood, or it was
Of course,
predominantly
yeah.
black?
Yeah, what happens is that unlike America, we've never really had segregation.
Oh,
So while
really?
there was definitely anti-black racism, it was called the color bar. And what that did is that kept black people out of certain jobs. It kept black people out of certain nightclubs. It kept black people out of certain drinking establishments. There was never de facto segregation. So even areas that were largely black still had white people living there. Do you see?
Okay.
And even areas right now, if you take, for example, where I live in a largely Muslim area. But even though it is largely a Muslim area, there are still more Christians living here.
Oh,
And
yeah.
my next door neighbor is white. The next door neighbor to that is black. The next door neighbor to that is white. And that's just London.
Okay. Well, going back to what you just said, when they had that color bar, did they do like they did here, where they had black only and white only signs?
No, no. But what happened is that if a black person tried to get into a certain nightclub, they'd be told this is for members only. But they don't have a members only policy. They're just not
Yeah.
letting you.
Yeah.
If you went into a certain public house, they wouldn't serve you, that kind of thing. But they did not have the signs.
When so and a couple more on you, like the grade school that you went to, was it integrated? Did white students go to that grade school?
Yes,
And
of course. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Hmm, hmm.
What was there a situation where, if I may say, your school was less inferior than other schools, or did they kind of give, even in the schools in your type of neighborhood, equal opportunity, what have you?
There's a different way that it operates. So what used to happen is there was a type of schooling in Britain that was known as SEN, Special Educational Needs. And what that was really for was for less intelligent children. And there was a policy that used to happen in the 60s that black children were disproportionately sent to those schools. And there was a civil rights campaign led by a black academic called Bernard Cord in 1971 to get those schools shut down. And that was a real thing. So that messed up the education of a lot of black children. But there was no such thing as an all black school. Do you see?
Yeah,
It
I
would
got you.
be a largely black school. But what would then happen is that black children, there was a policy, I said, in the 60s to try and send them to these SEN schools as a way of stripping up their education. And in many cases, it worked. It did mess up a lot of people's education, you see. But it wasn't done by making schools all black or all white. There were other ways that you could get the same result.
Right.
And so right now, there is still an issue trying to make sure that black children come out with the same amount of qualifications as everybody else. And
Okay.
there's been all kinds of policies that our communities try to do to make sure that our children don't leave school disadvantaged.
Oh, I'm gonna take liberties in this question. I'm gonna say you're a smart guy, right? Did you have an instance where they tried to do something to not give you your due because of racism? Let's say you got all the best grades, and they're saying, "No, we're not gonna let Robin get the #1 award." Any of that? Did you ever face that as a student or even in life?
I've faced that as an adult. That's definitely happened to me as an adult. So one of the reasons why I'm an entrepreneur is because if you try to climb the ladder in Britain, there are too many ways that you can be shot down. And why I've become an entrepreneur, why I preach entrepreneurship, is this is the one way that you can't be shut down. Do you
Yeah.
see? So yeah, I mean, if you speak to, I mean, when I, for example, I teach, I always ask when I'm addressing black adults, I'll ask, if you go to a school, which group of people do you see standing outside the head teacher's office about to be disciplined? And most people will
Okay.
say, oh, the black children. Then
Right.
I ask the second question, who is the second group of people standing outside the head teacher's office about to be disciplined? Answer, the black staff. And
Okay.
because that's the reality, it's much easier to progress if you build your own stuff.
I got
And
you. I love it. Did you ever what's the story with no Irish? Why did they hate Irish? What was that? Because I hear that there were signs that said no blacks, no Irish,
no
and some
Irish,
and yeah.
no
Go ahead.
dogs.
Yeah. What was the Irish? Why did they hate Irish?
Um, from an English perspective, Ireland was their first colony. And so discrimination against Irish people is a part of English culture. So you know that in America, the white Americans will tell anti-black jokes. In Britain, excuse me, in England, they would tell anti-Irish jokes. And even for me, as a black person growing up in Britain, I grew up listening to them. Do you see? Um, Irish people have very different appearances, but the stereotype is ginger hair.
Right.
And
Right.
ginger haired children are bullied in English schools, even now. You can Google it.
Really?
Oh, yeah, yeah, even now.
Okay.
Now, it's not necessarily just because they're Irish, but it's become associated. Do you see? So, yes,
Hmm.
ginger haired children do get bullied in English schools right now. And as someone that used to be a school teacher, I can tell you that I've seen it.
Okay.
So yeah, it
Again,
was because,
okay.
as I said, it was England's first colony, and
Okay.
England hasn't let go of it. That's why Northern Ireland is still a part of the United Kingdom.
Oh, I see. I see. Let me ask you this one. And I'm gonna be raw on this. They call when white people want to be discriminatory towards black people in America, they'll call them, and not so much now, but back in the day, they'll use the word nigger. Is
Mhm.
that used over there? What do they call black people to be mad at them in that similar type way?
That used to be one of the words. There was others as well. The most common one was wog. Yeah,
Woke.
wog, W-O-G.
And what did that mean, or how did that, I never heard, what was that word? Yeah, woke.
What it is because African Americans control the discourse. You all don't know that other people got racially insulted. So in other words, you would often you'd often be called a wog. You'd often get the term wogs out being painted on someone's house as if to say, we want you out of this neighborhood. Do you
Oh,
see?
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And that term wasn't just applied to black people, it was applied to people from India and so on as well living in
Oh,
Britain.
okay.
And that was probably even more common than the N word. Then, of
Okay.
course, you had Black Bastard and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sure. A couple more. Did you learn Black history in grade school? Did they teach that to you in any respect?
No, but it is taught now. But what's taught is actually African American history. So it is
Not,
taught now,
yeah, yeah.
not Black British history, no. So there's a course that is taught, we call it Key Stage 3 history. Key Stage 3 is what the 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-olds do. And schools do have the option of teaching a module called Black Peoples of the Americas. And in that module, there is the African American Civil Rights struggle. Now, it's not taught properly, and obviously, you'd expect there's a big kind of bias towards Martin Luther King,
Yes.
silence on Elijah Muhammad, silence on the Panthers. But yes, it is taught.
Okay.
Whereas Black British history, it's oh, what's happening now is a few of us are campaigning to get that into the schools, but that hasn't happened yet.
Okay, that leads to this question. How did you become who you are to teach history? Who told you something that sparked your interest, whatever, whatever?
Um, like most people my age, I didn't think there was any such thing as Black history. I grew up believing that there wasn't any Black history. So I grew up, in Britain, we did have access to the American TV series Roots. And so we all watched it. And what Roots did was to confirm this idea that the only history Black people have is as slaves. Now, what happened to me in 1989? I moved into a household where the gentleman of the house was Ghanaian, the wife of the house was Trinidadian, and they both had a book, The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. As you know, that's an African American classic, and
Okay.
that was the first book I ever read on Black history. I read it over and over and over. And then from there, people introduced me to the writings of people like Professor Yusuf Ben Yochanan, Professor John Henrik Clarke, Professor John Jackson, Professor Ivan van Sertima, and so on, so on, so forth. And then I came across a gentleman, Dr. Femi Biko, and he taught Black history and Black studies, but he didn't teach it in the system. He taught it outside the system.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop you there. When you say you ran across them books, they were in the library or someone snuck it to you? How did you run? They were at their home? Did they have those books in the bookstores at the library in London?
This is what existed. Uh, I came across Chancellor Williams's book in this household. But the other books, there was a bookshop in London, a Black bookshop called Head Start,
Okay.
which is
Okay.
named after the program for African Americans, Operation Head Start. Operation Head
Okay.
Start that
Yep.
created
Yep. Yep.
Sesame
Yep.
Street and
Yep.
all that stuff.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah, there was a
Sure.
bookshop in London that was named after that, and they imported those books. And
So
so,
go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
And so what I did was I began reading those books. And then what happened was somebody told me that there's this gentleman called Femi Biko, and he teaches Black studies, and he teaches it outside the system. So he taught it in Black community centers and that kind of thing. And I studied with him. And eventually he persuaded me to teach his course. And this was in 1991, 1992, something like that. And so by 1992, I was teaching Black Studies.
All right. Let me stop
And
you there. When he said he persuaded you, how did he do it? Like on a Saturday afternoon? He said, anybody who wants to come to hear what I got to talk about Black history, because he didn't teach it in schools. Yeah, what was that format?
it would be one evening a week,
Oh, okay.
maybe a Wednesday, something like that, from 7 o'clock
Okay.
till 9 o'clock.
Okay.
It would then be one evening a week for a whole year. And in the whole
yeah,
year,
okay,
he
okay,
would start. We would go through things like Black history, Black psychology, people like Amos Wilson, people like Frantz Fanon, people like Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing, sociology, the sociology of the black family, that kind of thing. All the different topic areas that make up Black studies. But he was doing this in a community center on I think, Wednesday evening, 7 till 9.
okay, okay,
And then what happened was I became one of his best students.
okay. Let me ask you, would the authorities had gotten wind of what he was doing, get mad at him for that, for enlightening the people?
They wouldn't intervene, but obviously they were not happy, but they wouldn't intervene. Or as far as we know, they weren't intervening. We don't know what was being,
Yeah, yeah.
but as far as we know, they didn't intervene.
So throughout history that you have there, have there been Black people that did what they could, like that gentleman, to enlighten the people as to of their own racial identity and history? There been movements or any of that kind of thing?
Yeah. There's a Black British civil rights history. And there are two scholars that have gone there. There was an older gentleman, his name is Dr. Vincent Hines, who published a book on it, and it was called something like How Black Britons Overcame 50 Years of Repression. And what it does is it talks about, for example, we talked about the color bar. To fight against the color bar, there was something called the Bristol bus boycott. And the Bristol bus boycott was led by a Black Briton called Dr. Paul Stevenson. And he was leading the Bristol bus boycott at the same time as Dr. King was making the I Have a Dream speech.
Oh,
You see,
okay, okay.
right, when Dr. King came to London, he met with a lady, she's now Dame Jocelyn Barrow, and Dame Jocelyn Barrow led something called the CARD Campaign Against Racial Discrimination. What that was if you were a Black person, the main shopping district in central London is Oxford Street. Another one is called Regent Street. These are the shopping districts. If you were Black, you couldn't work. Certainly not serving customers on Oxford Street and Regent Street. The color bar banned that. She was able to overturn that. Then you had, with the rise of the Black Panthers in America, there was the Black Panthers in Britain.
Hmm.
And there was a famous trial where the police framed 9 Black people. They were known as the Mangrove Nine. And there was a famous political trial in 1970 where the Mangrove Nine stood up against the police. They defended themselves in court, just like Bobby Seale tried to do, and they were successful. They all walked. They didn't. Do you see? So there's a civil rights history as well, but it wasn't about getting rid of segregation. It was about getting rid of the color bar, and then
Okay.
the specific aspects of it, such as I said, the schooling. We're still fighting that now. That kind of thing.
Well, when we talk about the British history, it's not good for them what they did.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody tell that story, and do they somehow try to apologize it? Is there a call for reparations over there? Any of that
Yes,
kind of
there
thing?
is. Yeah. There's a Black intellectual, Professor Robert Beckford, and what he did in 2005, he did a documentary called The Empire Pays Back. And what he did was he engaged some hotshot lawyers from the City of London, lawyers, accountants, that kind of thing. And what they did was to look at Britain's role in the slave trade, to work out at 2005 prices, if slavery hadn't happened, how much Britain would owe the descendants of its slaves, i.e., us. And they came with a notional figure of 7.5 trillion pounds at 2005 prices. And what they did was they worked out the figure for unpaid wages, they worked out the figure for unjust enrichment, and they worked out the figure for unjust imprisonment. Right? So they didn't put in how many people died. That they didn't include that. This is just unjust enrichment,
Right.
unpaid wages, and yeah, the three things.
Okay.
And they came with 7.5 trillion. And so some of our intellectuals in this country, we are running with that figure. And obviously that figure would have to be increased because that was
Sure.
2005 prices.
Right.
Yeah.
Now does because this is was there slavery in Britain? I'm sure there was, but did they go to Africa and bring them to Britain? Isn't that where it happened first, and then they started
not exactly, not exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
What happened is British people owned plantations, and those plantations would be Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, Virginia. And the reason why I'm saying this is what most African Americans don't know is the same people that enslaved us are the same people that enslaved you.
Really?
So what happens is, yeah. So if an enslaver owned plantations in Virginia, they'd be the same people that would own them in Barbados, the same people that would own them in Bermuda, the same people that would own them in Jamaica, the same group of people.
Yes.
So what happens is the African Americans, in talking about reparations, they're pointing, a lot of you all are pointing the finger at the wrong group of people. So a lot of you are saying, okay, you need to get reparations from the American government, which you should. But it's not just the American government that owes you. The British government owes you. Because the British government had Virginia right up until the American independence. The French government had Louisiana right up until you see, until the America became independent of that.
Okay.
And so consequently, the French government need to be tackled on what they owe the enslaved people of Louisiana. Do you see? It's not just what the American government owes.
Now, but in Britain, when they had slaves, did they have plantations? Like, was it a similar system as it was here in America, or was it had a different dynamic? And maybe they didn't work the fields, or what?
Not in Britain proper, yeah. But the British people would own the ones in the Caribbean. Do you see?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. I got you.
So what would happen is, now let's be clear.
Yes.
You would have an enslaver that would take their enslaved people from the Caribbean and bring them to Britain, where they would become domestic servants. Yeah, that certainly happened. But there was a famous English judge, Lord Justice Mansfield, and he put a stop to that. And so what happened was,
okay, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. Is that the same timeline as it happened here in America, or before?
No. Lord Justice Mansfield is 18th century, so this is before it happened in America.
Okay.
Yeah. But while he stopped enslavement in Britain, British people still own plantations in the Caribbean and South America right up until 1838. Do you see? Yeah.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
So the end of British slavery, if you want to say, when did Britain stop slavery? They stopped it one generation before you all had it stopped. So 1838 is the end of British slavery. So right up until 1838, every black person in Jamaica, every black person in Barbados, every black person in Trinidad, every black person in Guyana, we were all slaves.
And this gentleman stopped it, or was there laws put in place?
He stopped it in Britain.
In Britain. How did it stop in those other places that you mentioned? What were those?
Because what happened was there was the various rebellions. So you had the Haitian Revolution, as you know, about 1791 to 1804. You had the one in Jamaica, 1831, 1832. You had the one in Guyana, 1823. Do you see?
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
Do you all know were the enslavers? Has there been a book that said this family did what they did? Has that been chronicled in any regards?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. But me personally, I haven't researched that. Yeah, because finding out about which group of Europeans did what has never really been my focus. But there are plenty of websites in Britain that have done that. A lot of England's grand houses, they're called stately homes. They're basically private palaces and private castles that the aristocrats have. And there's been even British institutions, staffed by Europeans, where they've researched the history of the home and they've worked out where did the money come from to build those homes. And in many cases, it's slave plantations. So that
Is it?
research
Yeah.
definitely has been done.
Like here in America, they use the plantations as tourist attractions. Are any of
Yeah.
those homes tourist attractions there in
Oh,
Britain?
they are.
Say,
Oh, yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Oh, hell
really?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because they're the grandest homes in Britain. They're the grand. So what happens is the palaces in Britain. So have you seen films like, sake of argument, Upstairs, Downstairs?
Okay.
Some of the old British classics. They're all set in those kinds of homes. Most recently, Bridgerton. Have you been watching Bridgerton?
Yes, 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 yes. I have.
Yeah,
Sure have. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
set in those types of homes.
Is there somebody and maybe you've named them a white person who is leading the fight or who led the fight against slavery in Britain? Is there somebody that is like a folklore hero that said other than that judge maybe?
For me, the most important one is the judge. But okay, English people will try to present William Wilberforce as that man. But William Wilberforce, most Black Britons dismiss him, myself included. Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, there's no, like you've got John Brown. Yeah, there's
Right.
no John Brown over here. Trust me.
Oh,
Or if
right,
there
right.
is, we don't know who he is. There's no John Brown over here.
So there's no abolitionists or anything like that we can
Oh
like
yeah,
say
yeah,
John Brown.
but not one that would not one that would actually arm slaves. Do you see? Now,
Okay.
what there was in Britain, there was a big abolition movement
Oh,
involving a lot of white working class people. And what they were doing is they would petition to not eat products that with slave grown sugar. Right? That was a big thing. So that involved a lot of the white working classes. But those people were not directly involved in, as John Brown did, give
yeah.
guns to slaves. They didn't do
Right.
that. But
Right.
they did do the sugar boy. They're known as the sugar boycotts. Yeah. But
There's instances I know I'm going up the line here. Maybe I'm not. The Notting Hill riot. What was
yeah,
you familiar? What was that? Wasn't that because white people didn't want black people taking the jobs when they got there? Isn't that part of that rationale?
yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. So what you had was, we talked about modern Black Britain being 1948, where you had large numbers of people coming in from the Caribbean. A lot of them ended up in Brixton, but another part of London is Notting Hill. Notting Hill is central West London. And large numbers of Black people moved in there. And what you had were two groups of white people that were against that. You had young white people. They used to be in, you've got youth subcultures. One of them is called the Teddy Boys. And the Teddy Boys were racist and violent, and they would beat up Black people on a ratio of 6-1. So you get 6 men jumping one
Mm.
Black person. And then you also had in Notting Hill, there was a former fascist leader in Britain called Sir Oswald Mosley, and the center of his operations was Notting Hill. So you've got the fascists and you've got the Teddy Boys beating up Black people. And then the violence got bigger and bigger and bigger. And in 1959, they actually killed a Black person called Kelso Cochran. And so 1959, he becomes the first person to actually die at the hands of racists. And then the response from the Black community was to create Notting Hill Carnival as a way of trying to bring people together. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Notting Hill Carnival is one of the biggest carnivals in the world.
Mm.
It's gradually grown. And that was our response to try to bring people together, to try
Okay.
to ease that type of tension.
When does that happen? Is that's something that people around around America should come to, that carnival type thing too,
I think you
right?
should. I think you should.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
happens in August. It happens at the end of August,
Okay.
and it's basically 2 or 3 days. And it's the biggest event in central London or central West London at that time of the year. Sometimes you get as many as 2 million people coming to it, and it's still got the black flavor. In those days, in the 50s, the dominant group of black people to come from the Caribbean to Britain were from Trinidad, and so Carnival has that Trinidadian flavor even now. So you've got steel pans, you've got that whole Trinidad mass thing happening.
Uh, are black people? They're proud people in Britain. I mean, because without the strife that we have in America that made us come together, the civil rights movement and things of that sort, we have that to hang our hat on as a movement that helped us because we were all under the same conditions. Is that the case there, or everybody is kind of fragmented over the years? What's that dynamic? If that's the question.
Basically, Black Britain, it's a complicated story to tell, right? Now, there have been Black people in Britain for the last 2,000 years. But in reality, I'm not descended from them. And most Black people in Britain aren't descended from them. Do you see? We're descended from what happened in 1948. So in 1948, Black culture in Britain has evolved in 4 stages. The first stage was from 1948 to about 1962, where British culture was very Trinidadian. So our civil rights fighters, you had people like Claudia Jones, she was from Trinidad. Our music was calypso from Trinidad, steel pans from Trinidad. Our first stars, people like Winifred Atwell, the pianist, she was the first Black person to get her own TV show, Trinidad. Then you had the second wave of Black British culture, which was Jamaican. This is where we then get ska, rocksteady, and reggae culture. Yeah, and out of that, you get people like Bob Marley, right? And so British culture became very Jamaican. Then by the time we get to the 70s, the 1970s, you've got a generation of Black people born in Britain, and they wanted to produce their own culture, not from Trinidad, not from Jamaica, but influenced. Do you see? And then you had influences coming from America as well. And this is where we start to see a Black British sound. And the musical sound of Black Britain is called Lovers Rock, which is a version of reggae. Another sound was Black British soul. So you may have heard of Junior. Have you heard of
Yeah,
Junior? His tune
yeah,
Mama used to say. He
yeah.
is the king of Black British soul. Yeah. We also get people like Sade and so
Yes,
on. Yeah.
yeah,
Then by the time we get to the 90s, Black Britain became more African. So you got large numbers of people coming in from Ghana, from Nigeria, and from Somalia. And so what that's again changed up the culture. So now Afrobeats is now the biggest music in Black Britain. Do you see?
right.
So Black Britain is very, what's the word? It's not just one thing. Basically, Black British identity isn't just one thing. Now, for a lot of recently arrived people, A lot of them don't know the Black British civil rights struggles of the 50s, 60s, and 70s because they came in after that. You see?
Okay.
Yeah. And so the kind of common knowledge, so every African American knows who Martin Luther King is, every African American knows who Malcolm X is. Every Black Briton does not know who Paul Stevenson is. Every Black Briton does not know who Claudia Jones is. Do you see?
You're right.
Because if you came into Britain after all that had happened, and the fact being that Black British history is not taught in the schools, you're not going to know.
Being the kind of guy you are, can you find other people who got a thirst for knowledge like you do? Is there an association of historians or people who just want to know more that you
Yes
teach
and no.
you know what I'm asking you? Yeah.
Yes and no. There's a small but growing scene of people teaching Black history. Obviously, there's me. There is the lady that you interviewed, Avril Nansen.
Yes.
There is a gentleman called Tony Warner. Tony Warner has, if you like, got the baton, running with the baton for Black British civil rights history. He runs a company called Black History Walks. There's a gentleman called Andrew Mohammed. Andrew Mohammed, he also teaches Black history. As you can tell from his surname, he's Nation. And then you've got some people up and down the country doing the same thing. Now, as far as the academics at university, there is one that stands out head and shoulders above all the others, Professor Hakeem Addy. And a lot of people are now starting to qualify in Black history under him. He's at the University of Chichester. And there's another gentleman, Professor Kehinde Andrews, who is the first person to get Black studies on a curriculum. He's at the University of Birmingham.
Okay.
So anyone that comes out through the system that's saying something will come out either under Professor Kehinde Andrews or under Professor Hakeem Addy.
I'm gonna throw a name at you. I think it's London. David, he wrote some books. OLSU something. Do you know that name?
David Olusoga.
Yeah, yes. Is he out of London too?
No. He's from Newcastle, which is further up north. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's not from London, but what he is, he's not really a historian. He's a TV person.
Oh,
So
really?
he's
Okay.
good at making TV documentaries. Now his TV documentaries are excellent.
Sure.
And I think he's got a professorship on the back of it. Yeah. But he is more of a very good quality TV historian rather than an academic historian.
I got you.
Yeah.
And I think you alluded to this earlier. Can a Black person in London get a good job where he climbs the corporate ladder and eventually becomes, maybe like we have some here in America, CEO of a big Fortune 500 company, anything like that?
No. It can be done, but that's not how it's done. Generally speaking, if you're a Black Briton, if you're going to get to the top, you can't have been born here and then climb the ladder. What normally happens is people that were educated outside of Britain, say the Caribbean or Africa, they got to the top of what they got to the top of there and got parachuted into here. Do you see? Let me give you an example. There is a Fortune 500 company headed called the Prudential. That was headed by a Black man, Tijian Thiam. Tijian Thiam was not born in Britain. He was born in Ivory Coast or somewhere in West Africa. He was not born in Britain. There is a woman called Kemi Badenoch, and she is a rising star of the Conservative Party. This is not an endorsement of the Conservative Party. They on some madness. Yeah, just like Republicans in the United States. They on some madness. Yeah. But she wasn't born in Britain. She was born in Nigeria. And
I
what you'll
got you.
find is so if you ever see a black person who got to the top of an institution in Britain, the chances are they weren't born here. They were born somewhere else and got parachuted in.
Okay, well, okay, that leads to the question is how can that not why does that not happen for somebody that was born there? Somehow along the line, there's a ceiling or
Yeah, yeah,
there's some
yeah.
racism things that come into play. How does that? Yeah, right.
And that's why so many of us have become entrepreneurial. Do you see? Because that's the one way that people can't stop you. I mean, in general, this is what actually happens. Um, most rich black people that were born in Britain and got to the top in, okay, one way of doing it was originally it's boxing. After boxing, it was football. After football, athletics. Do you see? And then
Yes.
they make their millions in these things and then go into something else. Do you see? Yeah. And more recently, there's been a new generation of black people that have made it in drama. They've become actors. And some of them were even complained about by Sam Jackson, talking about all these black Britons coming over to America and taking our jobs. Do you remember when he said that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I
So
got
some
you.
people have made it like that. But notice that a lot of those black Britons didn't make it in Britain, they made it in America. So someone
Okay.
like Idris Elba,
Yes.
he didn't blow up in Britain, he blew up in America.
Yeah, yeah, I
Chiwetel
got you.
Ejiofor, same thing. He didn't blow up in Britain, he blew up in America.
Okay, that this goes to you then. Who supports your business? Do white people have an active interest and they won't be racist against you to support what you do, or you have to have the support of the black community to make a living, let's say?
My work is mostly based on the black community. Um, there may be a way of attracting the white community, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So my work is with the black community.
But here in America, if as like I said with my play and other things, white people have a hunger for learning black history. You
Mm-hmm,
don't
mm-hmm.
find that there.
No, no, no. Or it could be the kind of history that I teach, because the history that I teach is um, I don't make black history about, this is what the Europeans did, this is what the Europeans did, this is what the Europeans did, this is what the Europeans did. I make it, this is about what we did. And a lot of people can't get with that type of history. Do you see?
Okay, hold on. That leads to this. Black people don't do are black people open to want to hear the stories you tell,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you if I may say?
yeah. Because what I tell is so different to what they've heard. Do you see? Because what happens is,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, okay, my thing is this. Okay, let's talk about what everybody knows, slavery. Yeah. What you could do when you teach slavery is you could talk about the Portuguese started the slave trade in 1441. You could talk about how the Spanish continued it in the Americas. You could talk about Sir John Hawkins, 1562. You could talk about the first black people being brought to the United States in 1619. You could talk about this European did that, this European did that. Do you see?
Right. Yes, yes.
Right. That's one way of teaching Black history. This is what I teach.
Yeah, let's do it. We plug it too. We're gonna plug you
Yeah.
too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Did you know that ballroom dancing, nearly all of the ballroom dances come from enslaved Africans? Be it what in Britain is called the jive, came from African Americans, where it was originally the Lindy Hop. The foxtrot came from African Americans. It was originally one of the four plantation dances, the bunny hug. The rumba came from Afro-Cubans. The mambo came from Afro-Cubans. The tango came from Black people in Buenos Aires. The habanera comes from Black people in Havana. Right? So that's the kind of stuff I teach. Now, a lot of people don't want to hear that. What, do you mean that ballroom dances? Yeah, nearly all of them, except the waltz, the paso doble, and the polka. Nearly all of those dances come from either this group of black people or that group of black people. Right, then when it comes to things like enslaved people, did you know that farming technologies, one of the reasons for capturing enslaved Africans, excuse me, capturing black people and turning them into enslaved Africans to work the plantations was because Africans had technologies that would work on American soil, whereas European technologies didn't have the same kind of efficacy. So you had, for example, rice crops,
Right.
and the rice technologies that enslaved people brought to the Americas. And then you've got some of the other things as well, that it wasn't just rice. You could then break down the different types of technologies. So the kinds of things that I'm talking about then would be, okay, let me give you some examples.
Right.
All right. You've got plantain, bananas, rice, sorghum, cocoyam, ackee, okra, black-eyed peas, pigeon peas, watermelons. All of these things were brought by enslaved Africans. So much so that when, you had maroon communities where people ran away and created their
Yep.
own,
Right.
yeah. Do you know that when Europeans, such as Captain Stedman, came across enslaved Africans, and that had run away and become maroons, and therefore couldn't were able to grow their own crops and were able to eat their own stuff. Not like, with plantation slaves, your crops are being produced, but you can't necessarily eat them. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Africans used to call Europeans scarecrows. Do you know why? They
Okay.
were skinny. Why were they skinny? They weren't
Oh,
able to
really?
get the same amount of agricultural produce, the same amount of range of produce out of American soils as Africans could. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So that again, that's the kind of thing I would talk about.
Okay.
Then you've got other things too. Again, when it comes to things like cotton, I've got. Let me read to you. This is
Yes.
what a British official said in the 18th century. The cotton that has been carried from Senegal to Europe has been repeatedly proven to be the finest in the world. Let's read that again. The
Yes.
cotton that has been carried from Senegal to Europe has been repeatedly proven to be the finest in the world. Now,
Yes.
once people realized that West African textiles, West African cotton was the finest in the world, that became a reason to target West Africa for slavery, to get those textile people into the Americas so that they could create the cotton.
Yes. I see.
Yeah, but again, if you again you don't know these things, you don't know these things.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. 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 You finding these things, and as you teach them, uh, people get. And I just what you've told me now. I got a heightened sense of pride of being black.
what's the point?
That's what you're doing.
That's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I do. And if I can say so, let me.
Yes.
One of the things that I do is I make my information available online. So I teach an online program where the classes are all online, so people can, click and watch. And if I can put it in the chat,
Yes.
let me put it in the chat. I have a company called The Black Secret.
Yeah. That we're gonna plug. That was my next question. Yeah.
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 And what that is if people want to study Black history with me, and they want to do it in, they want to watch the classes at 10 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning. They
Yes.
can only
Yes.
fit in 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. They can do that. So it's a subscription, and the subscription is I think it's about £18 per calendar month. We're doing a discount, so it's about £18 per calendar month. I think the American price is about 20 odd dollars. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so
Okay.
we're telling people that if they want to do this, they and um we have a lot of content. Let's put it like that.
Okay. Okay. How about this? Do you have a book? Have you written a book?
Yes.
Let's plug
Um,
it. You got the book on hand you can show us?
okay, so the book is called When We Ruled. There is an American edition published by Black Classic Press. So Black Classic Press is William Paul Coates's company. They're in Baltimore.
Okay.
So yes,
And it's available on Amazon?
it's available on Amazon. It's available through their website as well. Their website is Black Classic Press. I think
Okay.
blackclassicpress.com.
Okay.
And I've written other books as well that are available on Amazon. But what I'm telling people is they want Black history information already broken down, already digestible. Check out the website,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
theblacksecret.co.uk.
Yeah. We're gonna put all that in the in the description under the video. Are you surprised at yourself that did you think this is what your life would be? Did you have other ambitions and you stumbled upon this? How did this happen for you personally? I mean, you told me about growing up in that home, but did you think you would make a career of it? Did you, what have you?
No. Originally, there were three subjects that I was good at. Um, uh, Physics, social sciences, and music. So I expected to go in one of those three directions. When I first came to London as an adult, I was studying, wait for it, classical music,
Okay, okay,
European classical music. So I used to be a trombonist. And then what happened was I worked for a while in a jazz orchestra. There's a jazz man in Britain called Courtney Pine, and his orchestra was called the Jazz Warriors. And there was a possibility of me going in that direction. And then it was purely by chance when Dr. Femi Biko suggested that I teach his course, where things took a very different direction. And so I'm very grateful for that direction because I wouldn't be the Black History Man if that hadn't have happened.
Let me brag on you on a couple of occasions. My next question: have you gotten some awards over there? I mean, I'm sure everybody knows you. I'm asking: have you been on TV? Do you do public speaking, that kind of thing?
Very, very rarely. I mean, I certainly do public lectures.
Okay.
I certainly do public lectures. The only real recognition that I mean, yeah, I've had recognition, but okay, let me give you some. There is something called the Power List in Britain. And what it is, it's a company that tries to find 100 most influential Black people in Britain.
Okay.
And they produce a magazine called the
Okay.
Power List.
Okay.
And I'm in the 2013
I love it.
edition.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
One of my books, I did a book called Black History Matters, won the ALCS 2020 book prize.
There you go.
That kind of thing. So there's been a few things. There's been a few
Yeah.
things.
Could you have a TV show or a podcast? Would that be an option? Is there like a not just internet but regular TV that
That hasn't
could deploy?
happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
that hasn't happened. And I can see why not.
But
No, I mean
but
basically, no, I mean the content that I teach is not I can see why a lot
yeah,
of people
okay.
wouldn't like.
Okay.
But
But
yeah,
then but
it's
go ahead.
something that I wouldn't turn it down if it came my
Yes,
way.
yeah.
The advantage that African Americans have is you make up about 14% of the population,
Right, right, right.
whereas we make up 3% of the population.
Oh, whoa, okay, okay,
Do you see? Yeah.
okay. Well, a couple more questions. Where would you say that Black Britain history is on the timeline compared to American history, in terms of the exposure that it gets? Could you simulate, we're here and you are 30 years behind us in terms of the acceptance of it, anything like that?
Here's where it is. Until Tony Warner came along, there Tony Warner is a person that's he's written a book on Black British history, which some schools are starting to use now. Yeah, by now I mean the last year or so. Me and some colleagues, we wrote a book on modern Black British history from 1948 till now, which we produced, I think, in 2018 or 2017. Some schools are using it, but only some. Let's not front. So we are way behind where you guys are at, way behind. And as I've said, a school student in Britain is far more likely to know the African American civil rights struggle than they are to have ever heard of Paul Stevenson, to have ever heard of the British Black Panthers, to have ever heard of the Mangrove 9 trial. Do you see?
Yeah, I got you.
So we're way behind where you are.
Okay.
No comparison.
How well accepted is Black History Month? Your October Black History Month. Do people come out in some groves? It's a big thing.
It's a big thing, but it's a big thing only in the Black community. It's not a big thing in the mainstream. Yeah, you see? Yeah.
So go ahead.
No.
Yeah. Do you have an NAACP?
No. The closest there was something called the West Indian Standing Conference, which was established in 1959. Yeah, during the same period as the Notting Hill race riots. But that organization, that's kind of old now, DC. And so there's no NAACP, there's no Urban League, there's none of that.
Oh. If a Black person had something that they said their rights were infringed upon and it's racist, do they have a voice? Is there somebody going to stand up for them? Do they have a shot in the court system for whatever reason?
Yes, but not for the reasons you're thinking, because there's certainly, here's the point. Just as African Americans are disproportionately jailed, so are we. In fact, in some ways, we are even more disproportionately jailed.
Really?
Yeah, even more. But what it is that for a lot of African Americans don't know that. Yeah. So, and when it comes to tripping up, the most vulnerable part of a person's life is usually when they're teenagers, because that's the time the system is most likely to catch you out. The amount of Black boys in particular that get caught out as teenagers is way more disproportionate than the amount of boys in America that get caught out as teenagers.
Really?
Yes. Oh yeah. And so we do have a youth gang problem. Yeah, we have it. It is what it is.
Okay, sure.
Mm-hmm. The main difference between the British and the American system is we don't have segregation. That's one difference. And the second difference is Britain does have more of a social security safety net. Right? So the poorest Black Britons don't hit rock bottom. Whereas in America, there is no social security safety net. So the poorest African Americans hit rock bottom. Okay. But the system in messing young people up and then jailing them and that kind of thing, yeah, we've got a bigger problem than you have.
One more question, and on a high note, if somebody like yourself, let's say the educated Black people, is there a group that they get together with and a think tank? Do they have a dinner that everybody comes to every year and it's good to see everybody? I don't know, like we do here, again, because the NAACP will do it, the Urban League will do it, the fraternities and sororities. Is that something that, like you will show up every year and everybody is all happy to see each other and they all, let's say upwardly mobile folk?
In truth, no.
Really?
There are people, yeah, no, the answer is no. There are people trying to create that. Do you see? There are people trying to create that. There are people that are trying to make that happen. And it's possible that the power list might evolve into that. Do you see?
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened yet. So
You
we're still waiting on it.
so you're not and this is my last question. So in many respects, but you're not a lone ranger doing what you do. You name some other people. It's just not a lot of them.
That's
And
right.
you
That's
have to
right.
open
That's
the
right.
eyes to the populace to say, hey, let's do this.
Yeah. That is pretty much what it is. It is that's what it is. So the kind of things that African Americans have, like sororities, fraternities,
Yeah,
we don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
any of that. You guys have got historically black universities. We don't have
Yes.
any of that.
Yes.
You guys have got, you could argue that Atlanta is Black America's capital city,
Yes.
where you've got a city. We've
Yes.
got Brixton, which is a district in a much bigger city. Not the same thing. Do you
Yes.
see?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we
Well,
don't have any of that.
okay. Lastly, and I always do this, has there been a question that I have not asked you, some that you want people to know, or any of that we haven't covered? Anything
Uh,
come to
only,
mind?
only to mention that if people want to learn Black history, not just Black British history, not just African American history, African history, the whole complete story of what we can document on Black history, past, present, check out my site,
Yes.
www.theblacksecret.co.uk. It's a subscription site. Check it out, and
Yes.
it's transformative. The content that we have is transformative.
There you go. Hey, everybody, I told you you're gonna love this. And the accent is nice too. I like the accent. I guess I got an accent that don't sound like your accent. I don't know, but the accent is nice. Smooth guy too. So everybody, go to his website, please. It's all gonna be in the description. Join his class. Very thorough, very easy to understand, very comprehensive. Do that, my friends. Everybody, check me out. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Subscribe to this show. Hit the like button on this video because there is no love button, but I know you loved it. Hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. And to you, my brother, I say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I really mean this. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, because I love what you're doing. I can feel it. This has become your passion. One day it hit you through the makings of, let's say, God Almighty deemed you to be the guy to do what you're doing. And you're carrying the mantle very well. There's no question about it. That everybody I've talked to said, whoa, that's a heavy weight there. You are doing it very well. And so please do those things until we meet. And I'm going to meet you. I want to shake your hand. That's going to happen. I pray. Do those things. And everybody, with that, I'll say bye-bye. We out. Thank you.
Thank you very
Peace.
much. Have a good one, sir.
You too.